this is precisely why I can't reach an understanding. The more you desire coexistence, the more people die by your hands. And above all else, you reek of death. You've murdered so many to reach that state. Why do you keep killing despite your wish to coexist with people? Forgive me for asking a question in exchange, but why would you ask such a thing? The quote above is from a series by the name of Frieren Beyond Journey's End. Within this manga, the main antagonists are these species known as demons. However, they aren't the stereotypical demons you may think of in most works of fiction, but rather quite a complex creature whose very nature makes them unable to understand basic human nature such as empathy, guilt, death, etc., making them abusers by nature. Though this video has nothing to do with this manga, I thought that the characters within it would serve as a great example of today's topics. Here's a quote. Controllers and manipulative people don't question themselves. They don't ask themselves if they are the problem. They always say someone else is the problem. The mind of the abuser is not like yours. It is an important distinction, and one you must remember. Earlier in this series, we'd come to learn of a demon who would say the word mother before their death, or before a human could get their hands on them. Demons, like monsters, do not get raised by their parents. In their early years, they oftentimes live in solitude, and thus they have no concept of family, down to their very being. So when Frieren would ask, why say it? The demon would say, because it stops you from killing me. It is a magical word. A chilling line, as you would come to understand that these things are truly inhuman. They view something so vulnerable as the word mother, as the act of pleading for one's life, as just another tool in their arsenal of survival. These creatures are abused by nature, and there just isn't any other way for you to comprehend what they are thinking. But what if you could? Video games, being a different media, can of course be used in such a different manner, allowing those who are playing to ingest the story quite differently, as if they were to just watch a show, read a book, watch a movie, or any other type of media. So let's get the big one out of the way, shall we?
Now there's a world just for you.
Mouthwashing, a game created by a talented folk at Wrong, Oregon, where you play as said abuser. In fact, in recent years, this has to be by far the best display of, mind of abuser type gameplay. For those who somehow still don't know what mouthwashing is, or haven't seen any type of spoilers on TikTok or something like YouTube shorts, whatever, here's a quick rundown. When you play the game, you start off as playing as someone you're not supposed to know just yet, but dude enters the cockpit and personally crashes the ship. That's all you need to know. The game then splits into two deviating storylines, what happens before the crash and what happens after said crash. Personally, I think the rundown would be a lot smoother, and it would also have an interesting perspective on something that I want to speak on more later in the video if I just do what happens after the crash first. 2 months would then pass and we see a full crew of people. We would have Daisuke, the young recruit, or Daisuke. I actually don't know how to say it, but I'm gonna just say Daisuke. We got Anya, the on-site nurse, Swansea, the hardened veteran, Jimmy, the new captain, and Curly, the old captain, and he's the one who allegedly crashed the ship. The crew doesn't really have enough food, as they were really only supposed to be on transport for a certain amount of time. As I said, they are transporting cargo. And so Jimmy would devise that they may or may not be able to get into the cargo and see if it could help them for survival. And of course, when going down to the cargo, the crew would find out that they're just transporting. The crew flips out because they're in this dangerous situation over some dumbass mouthwash. Anya freaks out because of obvious reasons. Daisuke and Swansea start drinking the mouthwash, and Jimmy is just as stoic as ever. After some time, we see that Jimmy and Anya have been taking care of Curly, and when I say taking care of, I really mean just stuffing pain meds down his throat to shut him up. We'd skip over some time again, and the crew have been sipping on that mouthwash, getting a little too lit. Swansea is dancing like a fool, Daisuke is saddened by his life choices, and Anya is thinking if she should partake, but of course she knows that nothing good will come from it. Jimmy and Anya know that the meds are getting mighty low, and so they hatch a plan to break some of the foam, keeping the air in to get to the medical closet. And when doing so, Jimmy would explode as he believes that all of this responsibility is far too much. And of course, he takes it out on Curly. 2 months would go by and Anya is trapped herself within the medical closet, forcing Jimmy and Daisuke to spike Swansea's drink and climb through the ventilation shaft to get into the room. Daisuke ends up getting injured pretty bad and also happens to see Anya's lifeless body. She overdosed on pills, effectively killing herself. Due to Daisuke's injuries, they try to clean it out with mouthwash, but Swansea ends up believing it to be best to just put him out of his misery. And then he snaps and threatens to kill Jimmy, as this was all his fault, making Jimmy flee, find a gun, and kill Swansea. All the while, Curly is just laughing in the back, leaving only him and Curly alive. Jimmy would absolutely snap, bring all of the dead crewmates and imitate a birthday together with them. Only now, Curly's the cake. He would finally understand what he did wrong, and that Curly was the better man. So in an attempt to fix everything, he tried to save Curly by giving him 20 more years to maybe be rescued, then proceeds to end his own life. The end. As I said, I skipped over certain parts of the game because I think it'd be smoother upon review, but it was also for those who know the game. Doesn't the play of events sound a bit choppy? Like things that happened just kind of happened out of nowhere. The crash, Anya taking her own life, Daisuke getting hurt, Swansea snapping. It's because of all these events were in the eyes of the abuser. 7 days before the crash, everything was seemingly normal. Curly had just finished up with the psyche evaluation and deemed fit to continue being on the ship, but Anya voices concern over Jimmy as he keeps dodging and taking like the evaluations, and Curly offers to do it for her. The two separate, and here we learn that Jimmy was given the role thanks to Curly, and not just that, but also that Jimmy harvests a bit of envy towards Curly, wondering why everyone loves Curly despite thinking that he could probably do everything he does, but better. That he's the better man. And that's when some documents are faxed from the higher ups. It's news that everyone is being laid off once this trip is through, but they ask Curly to keep quiet and not tell him until they're closer to the destination. However, Curly, being a good person, tells everyone. Obviously, everyone is sad, angry, and confused about getting laid off, but Jimmy is especially livid. He claims that Curly secretly wanted this to happen. Things seem to calm down for a bit. On a quiet night, Anya asks just how much longer do they have for transport, implying a bit of urgency to getting off the trip. But why? And well, we get our answer. When Curly is looking for the gun, he finds that Anya actually has it, claiming she wants to hide it from him. When Curly asks who, she interrupts him saying, "Who else?" Jimmy has been sexually assaulting Anya for God knows how long, and it's only gotten worse due to recent events, making her fear for her life. Curly, still wanting to try and fix this, ends up being too late as Anya goes to speak to him first, causing Jimmy to become very defensive and very unstable. When Curly would go to speak with him, against his better judgment, he allows Jimmy to walk away, and that's when we see the beginning scene play out. Curly never crashed the ship. Jimmy did. Curly was simply just a scapegoat, making everything that happened in the duration of this game so much darker. I do not know if the creators intended for the story to be told in such a way where taking out all the context perfectly invites you into the mind of the abuser, but it works super well. From the start, you are made to seem like the victim, a victim of your own mind as you run around the ship, haunted at the very company that put you on there, to then seeming like the responsible, selfish leader type, doing all the hard tasks like dealing with Curly, all the while just looking to Anya as if she's the weak link, not realizing, or better yet, not wanting to realize that he's the reason for her reaction, to the words literally being unable to be read that would eventually say take responsibility, to having Swansea and Anya speak behind your back, to fool himself that Anya is just overreacting and belittles her when locking herself in the medical room, to fooling himself once again that the ventilation shaft is the only way of getting in, getting Daisuke killed, blaming it on Swansea, blaming it on Curly, until realizing his wrongs and not taking responsibility, but instead fooling himself one last time and killing himself, and only subjugating Curly for 20 more years of torment. We are in the mind of Jimmy, the last person he believes to be the problem.
James, honey, did something happen to you? After we got separated in that long hallway? Are you confusing me with someone else? You were always so forgetful. Remember that time in the hotel?
Maria?
You said you took everything, but you forgot that videotape we made. I wonder if it's still there.
How do you know about that? Aren't you Maria?
Silent Hill 2 not only has some of the best OSTs in the series, but really hammers home the point I'm trying to get across. The mind of the abuser is an enigma, not meant to be understood, though Silent Hill 2 tackles the topic a bit differently than Mouthwashing. In Mouthwashing, Jimmy is troubled without any reason. He's just spiteful, envious, full of hate, and worst of all, a coward. However, in Silent Hill 2, James Sunderland, the main protagonist of the game, is suffering from something called maladaptive defense mechanisms. Essentially, it's when something within the environment, either eternally or externally, transpires, making it difficult for the person to cope, ultimately making them ignore the elephant in the room, as it's the best for the body to get rid of all of that stress. Within the game of Silent Hill 2, we start off with a note from our dear wife, who has passed away 3 years prior, but somehow she sent this letter to us. So James has now tasked himself with finding his dead wife in their quote-unquote special place, that being the town known as Silent Hill. Of course, when going there, she never really specified the actual location, and so James is forced to look around the town, finding monsters, troubled individuals, seductive counterparts to a certain person he knows. Through many, and I mean many, hints towards the truth that James was trying to delude himself from the truth, when finally finding her quote-unquote special place, which happened to be a hotel they frequent, he'd find a VHS tape filled with footage, showcasing his wife, happy. Then slowly but surely she'd start to look more sick and begin to say very hurtful and volatile things, becoming very verbally abusive. This is a very common thing that is displayed in terminally ill people who become different people, becoming mean, angry, and just completely different. And this could be caused by many things: the stress of knowing your life is ending, the medications you are likely on, becoming envious of those around you and how happy they are and full of life they are, or simply just feeling confined by fate. And these are all the things that James had to sit through. He believed himself to be strong enough to stay by her side, but the abuse was just too much. James, in the beginning of the game, states that his wife died 3 years ago, though by the end we understand that to be false. She died recently, but to him, the moment she became ill, the moment she became volatile, his wife died. Sweet is a cycle. Whether you go on to abuse someone else or abuse yourself, we see the latter coming from James. Due to him snapping, he'd go and search for his actual wife, the one he remembers, the one that was happy, the one that wasn't ill, the one he didn't kill with his bare hands. Of course, within the town of Silent Hill, it being more supernatural, the town would constantly throw reminders and hints of the true nature of our protagonist. The rotting corpse you have to fight with a wooden stick, well, that's just how James saw his rotting wife. The over-sexualized nurses struggling to breathe, well, that was just James' sexual frustration, how he viewed the nurses, and of course, how he killed his wife. The floating bed boss thing with lips, that's just how James viewed his wife in the worst moments before her death. And finally, Pyramid Head, the executioner of Silent Hill, and also is James' inner conscience, designed to torture and punish him for his actions, for his sins. Watching James, chasing James, and it doesn't just stop with the enemies. It's the same with the people that James would come to meet in the town of Silent Hill. Angela, an abuse victim herself, is constantly trying to harm herself as everything around her always feels to be burning, representing James' depressive tendencies due to his wife. Eddie, a man who's been bullied, becoming a murdering psycho, representing James' inner anger problems and likeliness to snap as he did when killing Mary. Maria, a human literally created from the town of Silent Hill to represent what James always wanted out of Mary: more sex appeal, to always be fond of him, etc., etc. And finally, Laura, the little girl whose innocence makes it to where she's unable to see the monsters, representing that there is a light at the end of the tunnel for James, being hope for the man. While Jimmy was this unapologetically disgusting human waste he just was the worst character that came out of 2024. I believe, and this might be crazy to say, but I believe if James had no backstory, if we heard nothing from James, if we didn't know what he went through, the abuse he went through, the psychological break he's having, I believe that Jimmy and James would begin to look very similarly, because on the outside looking in without the context, James looks like he was sexually frustrated with his wife because she got sick. She said some mean words, and of course those would be hurtful, but now it just looks like James went ahead and smothered his sick wife and basically lied to himself, saying that he did it for her because she was in so much pain, all the while he was just trying to rid himself of something that he viewed not his wife anymore. When you put James in that light, and trust me, this hurts me to say because I really do love James Sunderland as a human being, as a game character, and I truly sympathize with the man. However, you take away everything that makes him likable. You know, him trying to help out Angela, him trying his hardest not to kill Eddie, and of course helping Laura get out of that town. Take away all of that and just look at what he's done. How can you not say that James and Jimmy are very similarly? Of course, Jimmy is much worse because, like I said, Jimmy's sexually abused. He viewed himself in a different light than others, and he really put himself up there. But how can James be much different when James literally did the same thing? He spent the entire game lying to himself. There's also a theory that Mary's body is in the back seat as he's driving around looking for his wife. Jimmy and James lie to themselves. Jimmy thought he was better than what he was, and he was envious of Curly and wanted to show that, to prove to himself that he was a better man, only to come realize that he's not built like Curly, unfortunately, and he would take the easy way out. The only thing that makes Jimmy and James different is that James stopped lying to himself. He truly looked down at his demons and understood what he did. And as I said, there are so many different endings that you can pretty much think about whatever canon ending there was. You can either have James that walks out of that town of Silent Hill a new man with Laura. That's the best ending you can get. You can also view him just staying with Maria, choosing to delude himself further into his own psyche. Then he would definitely be Jimmy, right? Or you could just try and go for the more supernatural route and try to resurrect her. That's delusion as well, yeah. If you take away the supernatural tendencies of Silent Hill, and then you can have the last and most poetic one, killing yourself along with your wife in the car, driving off and drowning. And that's pretty much what Jimmy did. He didn't fix anything, he just killed himself. He just took the easy way out. When you look at that, there are so many similarities to them, except James understood what he did. And instead of trying to fix everything, he tried to understand, comprehend, and move on. And I believe that is what makes James just so likable. But like I said, just strip away all of that. We don't learn about any of the vindictive and verbal sweet that was present. James just looks like a man that murdered his wife because she had gotten sick and he was sexually frustrated. I'm sorry, but that's just how that looks. But since we do know of James's background and we know that he went searching for the truth, it was almost as if he put himself through trials, that he was abusing himself. I mean, literally, the Pyramid Head was that. It was to punish and torture him until he understood what the hell he did wrong. And then finally, when he understood it, he would back up and fight back and truly stare what he did in the face and come to terms with it. But okay, what would happen if you let that hate for yourself fester? That guilt overstays its welcome. What would happen?
No crying until the end. Guaranteed mess. Lisa is finally complete.
Lisa the Painful is a part of a trilogy series. It's the second and most prominent installment within the game, and it also happens to be the only game where Brad Armstrong is our protagonist, the man I would like to focus on today. A quick rundown of the story. Olaf, a small town where our main character Brad Armstrong lives with his father. Brad does not have it easy. In fact, he is bullied, ignored by the adults, and worse yet, physically abused by his own father. If you were to play the previous games, Lisa the First, you'd come to know that during this time, Brad's grandfather would actually take him under his wing and train him at his dojo, as he was a master of the Armstrong fist or something. I don't know. He was a badass. Anyways, during this time, Brad's father began sexually abusing his own daughter, ending up driving her to commit suicide, just adding to his trauma. Now, I don't want to get too into it, but I do want to paint the father, Marty, as a terrible human being. I think when I was writing the script, I was more so just kind of focusing on what happened in the game, but it is implied that even before Brad left, it all started, they were a good family, right? But then the mother passed away, disappeared, something happened. And that's when Marty became more sexually and physically abusive to both parties, the sister and the brother, being Lisa and Brad. And then there was one thing that I wanted to really pinpoint here, is that even before Brad left, he was still being sexually sweet as well. Marty would oftentimes do things to his daughter Lisa and have Brad watch. And if Brad would not watch, he would be extra bad for Brad later down the road. There have been so many times where Brad would have been doing very innocent things like playing with their mother's makeup and stuff like that. And Marty would see, and he would beat the absolute shit out of his son. So I just wanted to like stop the video here and tell you guys about like just how bad Marty is, because I'm looking at the script and I don't really get into it, but Marty is a bad man. I really want to point that out. Like the abuse was prominent. It was bad. But as I said, it was just adding to his trauma, and he began training at the dojo and he got a lot more strong physically. By the time he'd get back, it was far too late. He had the strength for himself to protect himself from his father, but he was not able to keep that promise he shared with his little sister. That promise being that they'll always stick together. Brad's father would skip town. Brad would struggle to grow up and leave behind his troubled past. Unfortunately, Lisa's death did not only affect Brad, but also one of his dear students, Bucky, which he of course blamed him for. He loved his sister and now terrorizes him every chance he gets. Brad's dojo getting a little too good? Well, let's destroy his shit. What's that? Brad got himself an adopted son he's trying to grow up? Let's tear his fucking face off. After Lisa's death, Brad had already started heavily taking pain meds to numb his pain from all the guilt. This would continue for a very long time, and we would see that Brad would even become very abusive and aggravated to his friends when he couldn't get the pain meds that he was wanting. Off-screen, Buzzo even grew up with this festering hate remaining in his heart and would work alongside a crazy doctor to spread this pain-numbing drug known as Joy around Olaf. Joy had the properties to have some serious side effects, mainly turning you into a mindless mutant who only reacts off of pure instinct. Simultaneously, an event mysteriously known as the Flash would strike, and but a moment, all of the women in the world were gone, just like that. Time seemed to flow differently as days would stretch on forever while nights would just fall for but a couple hours. I have my theories on the game and what the Flash really was, but this is not the in-depth video, so I implore you to go watch my video explaining all of 3 games. Lisa the First, Lisa the Painful, and Lisa the Joyful. But back to the game. Of course, this caused an uproar. The terrain became that of a desert. Men began killing and near each other, and it became a dangerous wasteland. Oh, and of course, everyone was taking joy, including Brad. At a certain point, Brad would find a baby alone in a wasteland. This baby happened to be a girl. Brad, knowing the dangers of this world, decided to take her under his wing and raise and protect her the best he could, even if that meant shackling her freedom. For good reason too, as the secret would get out and immediately Brad would travel the lands of Olaf to get her back, and at every turn we hear enemies speaking on how they'll have their way with this young child. So why bring Brad up? He seems like the victim of it, not the cycle of it. Well, it's quite tragic. Earlier in the game we see as Brad goes through a mental dilemma, one of which being he and Marty. Marty would speak ill of him, saying he's just a boy and that he can't deal with some bullies. How the hell is he supposed to deal with the harshness of the actual world? Over time, we see Marty's body become more and more disfigured until finally he's begging for Brad to stay, because without him, he has no one. Marty, the coward, only realized what he had as it was leaving. Now let's fast forward through Brad's journey through Olaf for Buddy. As the player, you can just see how fucked up this world has become, and with every encounter, we cheer for Brad. And depending upon how you play, you could even start being clean and tank the game with joy withdrawals, which makes you cheer even harder. You're like, Brad is a good person. I can see it. I'm controlling him to be a better person. But towards the end, Buddy would go missing due to Bucky, one of the main antagonists, but Buddy was sighted on a remote island. When finding her, she'd be accompanied by a very, very old Marty. One that has seemed to change with age, now appearing much weaker, nicer, more understanding. But this is when the game changes for me. You have the ability to turn the other cheek, to forgive him and leave, to take Buddy and just get out of there. But it doesn't matter what you choose. You can choose to spare, to forgive. But Brad would take sentience, and he simply could not. Anger explodes in a violent outrage as he beats his father to a bloody pulp. And now you have to understand, in Buddy's perspective, Brad never spoke of his father. Hell, he never even allowed her to call him dad. So when she's been out in this dangerous situation, you know, meeting dangerous person after dangerous person, the first guy in days that is genuinely nice to her, Bradley comes and beats the living shit out of him, even harming Buddy in his blind rage, leading her to run away. When Brad would again catch up to her, she'd be behind the infamous powerhouse known as Rando's army. Rando just so happens to be a gentle giant looking for an era of peace, and also so happens to be Brad's adopted son. All the comrades you make along the way beg for you not to do this, to just chill out. But in a tragic twist, Brad would begin to speak just as Marty did, not realizing that he has hurt her the most, not taking into account that he may be the one in the wrong here, not taking the time to even account for how she feels, what she wants, stating things like she doesn't know any better. You guys are just filling her head with lies, filling her head with nonsense, blinding her. Very similar to what Marty would tell his children, that there isn't a world out there for them, that they're too weak to be accepted anywhere else, that they are spoiled enough to have fantasies of something better. Obviously, it's a load of lies and a huge ass case of self-reflection, as Marty is the most coward of them all, the weakest of them all. Brad has now done the same thing. Buddy dreams of being useful rather than just being another victim of Olaf, and Brad just can't see that. And so he goes to kill every last member of Rando's army all by himself, losing arms, penetrated by a number of spears and glaives, barely able to walk, and yet nothing seems to knock him down, until he finally gets to Buddy, and she blows up in anger, asking why does he aim to keep her as miserable as possible? Why doesn't he just listen? Why won't he just leave her alone? And Brad replies how for once in his life, he wanted to do something good, that he wanted to protect her, that he couldn't let her get hurt. But as they say, words are the sharpest knives. She replies that Brad himself was the one that hurt her the most. And after literal spears and stab wounds, this is what put Brad on his knees. In this video, I aim to start off with very morally unjust characters who inflict abuse upon others or themselves, and slowly go into characters that have a bit more nuance, a bit more complex reasonings for them being the way that they really are. And ultimately, I want to drive this topic of abuse and all forms of abuse that it comes in with the video game characters that I choose to talk about. For example, Jimmy, he has no redeeming qualities and is given very little reasons as to why he's the way that he is. There's no fancy backstory, nor does it need there to be. Jimmy serves as an example of just trying to get into the mind of the abuser and ultimately hating his actions or trying to comprehend. There's no logic to it all. It is simply human flaw and human error. James is like Jimmy. I know, tough pill to swallow, but the things that he's done are quite irredeemable, because his wife gotten sick and became much more verbally abusive, volatile even, due to the major change in her life. James for years built up all of this hate and varying emotions until they finally exploded. James is an objectifier and a murderer, and like James, he is fundamentally flawed as a character. However, we, thanks to the Silent Hill supernatural tendencies, are able to poke around in the mind of James and understand how he has fallen. And with Brad, we get a view of everything from start to finish. However, unlike the others, Brad actually manages to break the cycle of abuse. Jimmy's actions caused the ship and everyone on it to die. No second chances given. James' actions caused deep internal scarring for himself to overcome, and with the game having many different endings, we see how those internal wounds may never heal. But Buddy does accept his role in her life. And in the following game, Lisa the Joyful, she truly understands Brad on a deeper level, albeit after doing many heinous things and spending a good part of the game just hating on the man. But in the very end, she does understand that Brad did love her, and so she chooses forgiveness, something Brad couldn't even do, and turns the world into a new era. But what about those who are absolutely bad people? Abusers, killers, etc., but somehow remain good but flawed people. Let's get into them. I imagine this is where I'll be getting the most pushback from the characters I choose to relate to. I'm gonna start it off, and I purposely chose these characters because I know their beloved fan bases could literally find anything to defend them, because they are good characters. They're hard to hate. It's literally like the meme.
He was the best guy around.
What about the people he murdered?
What murder?
But let's start it off, shall we? Joel from The Last of Us. Oh my god, how can he say that, Joel? Joel is a bad man.
Jesus Christ, Joel. What'd you do?
Where's the operating room?
I ain't got time for this.
Where? Top floor, the far end.
The quick story of Joel is that he was once a hard-working single parent who had a daughter named Sarah. At least I think so. Sarah Miller? If I remember that, I'm the GOAT. But that's when this freaky fungus cordyceps outbreak happens. It's these freaky fungus things that take over the hosts, killing them and controlling their bodies. Zombies. And they're very, very real. We actually seen these cordyceps, and this is where the core idea comes from. For fun facts here, this has nothing to do with the video, but there are literal, like, not images, but video recordings of these cordyceps taking control of the ant brain and literally replacing them as their brain and then just controlling their body like a puppet. It's very scary. Very scary. If that could happen to humans, we're done for. And that's what this whole show is about and game is about. During the outbreak, they ended up shooting Sarah, killing her. And that's when we skip 20 or 40 years in the future. I actually don't remember the exact number, but Joel is old as hell now. He's a nunk and is much more hardened, clearly still bothered by the death of his daughter, as he's wearing the watch that she gave to him the night of the outbreak. That whole watch thing is very big for him because like I said, she gave it to him for his birthday, and then yeah, he still wears it, so he still is very connected to Sarah. During this time, Joel has become a killer, a smuggler, a bandit, anything to survive, literally anything he had to do. The world became abusive, so he had to play. He had to become a monster to kill the monsters. He would then be tasked with smuggling this young girl to the Fireflies, a rebellion group working for a cure or something. Like I said, it's all very fuzzy. I haven't really caught up on it, but I do know the core mechanics of this character. Ellie, the new daughter, seems to be immune to the bites, and that's why she's so damn important. So we spend the later half of the game or TV show showing these two's relationship becoming stronger and stronger until Joel realizes that the treatment of getting said cure will literally kill her in the process. So now we must choose: save the world, or possibly save the world, or save his new daughter. Well, he already failed once, so. Now, when you either played or watched this scene play out, I'm sure we were all on Joel's side. I mean, no one wanted to see Ellie die, but I don't get it twisted. Joel is still not a good man. If we travel back earlier parts of the game, he had his partner in crime, Tess. Tess would lead into the fact that they have done some dirty shit in the past, but this right here, this is something that actually matters. And she's pointing at Ellie saying that we could save the world with this. We can right all of our wrongs if we were to save this girl. And going back even further, when we talked to his brother, I forgot his name, and he's talking about the things they used to do before then. And they made it sound like they would rob, steal, kill, anything they needed to do. And now he's just trying to live this peaceful life with this new girl. And going back to Tess and Joel, we even see how Joel and Tess don't even bat an eye when they accidentally kill someone, you know, and they're just used to it. They don't care. In the show, Joel, when smuggling Ellie, kills a guard that was just taking a piss. The fact that he came in to smuggle this child means that he's done it before, or at least he's done something similar of smuggling, and that's why they could trust him with such an important task. And finally, spoiler alert, killing all those fireflies to get to Ellie, they were innocent. They hadn't done anything particularly wrong that was deserving of death. They kind of just were an obstacle, and Joel had to get them out of the way. Those were innocent lives that he took for the price of one. On paper, it's far from just, and the fact that he and Ellie's relationship had grown so much that he knows this was her purpose, and yet he still chose to look her in the eyes and lie, saying the heartbreaking lines, "I swear," in reference to when she was asking if he truly had no choice. This is abuse. Emotional abuse, as Ellie knows Joel is lying, and that's why it hurts her even more, because he's choosing to lie to her, knowing how much it meant to her, knowing that this was her only thing that she ever thought was her purpose in life. She had lost literally everything. This was her last thing. Okay, so that was pretty bad. He chose one girl's life who wanted this and lied to her about what really went down, on top of pretty much dooming the world to fight the infection without a cure. Now, obviously, like I said, this part of the game here, or this part of the video, is meant to question, okay, well, he may have a ways, but it doesn't always paint you as right and wrong. You can be accidentally abusive, like child neglect is an abuse. Emotional abuse could be a type of abuse. Like if your father, like personally, I'm gonna get more into it, but I would never ever say my father was abusive. But there will be times when you can say his actions were abusive. I'll give you one quick story. So back in middle school, maybe even younger than that, I think it was elementary school, I used to have to ride the metro to school. And my mom and dad, it was still the age where phones weren't a huge thing. Like, yeah, there were phones out, but not everyone had it. There weren't like super good plans on them and stuff. And so my mom used to work for Amtrak, I think, and she would get these government issued like flip phones that had minutes on them. And so they gave me one of those, and they said, when you're at school, text me. When you get back, text me. or when you're on your way home, text me. Each text took like 2 minutes off, and I had like 200 for every month. It was a whole thing, but I digress. There was one time where I think I started making friends, and I started texting people on that. I started doing wrong things. Okay, so I didn't know that's not what happened. Sorry, I'm trying to remember the story. The story is the stupid flip phone would lose charge. Even if I charged it overnight and I had it all throughout the day, that stupid flip phone would just lose charge while turned off. And so I remember one day I saw my phone, it was on E, and I knew for a fact that it was going to die before I got home. Me trying to be the good Samaritan that I am, got to the train station, and I started freaking out like, damn, my mom and dad really got mad at me for not texting them when I got on the train. What should I do? And so I hung around the entrance of the train station, and I looked to my left and right, and I was like, yo, can I use your phone? Can I use your phone? Can I use your phone? Can I make a call? Everybody either ignored me or said no. And so my second option was, okay, well, who's gonna have to talk to me? Who cannot ignore me? And so I went to a police officer who was at the train station. And I said, hey, can I use your phone to call my mom and let them know that I'm on my way home? At that point, I thought he was just gonna give me his phone and I was just gonna talk. But I guess since I was a black boy with locks, he didn't trust me fully. And so he dialed up the number and called and said, hey, your son's on his way home. You should expect him in 20 minutes. I said, wow, that was perfect, thanks. I go about my business. I get on the train, get home, Unbeknownst to me, my mom and dad freaking out. Because not even my mom and dad. My mom is freaking out because she thinks I got arrested and they were telling her to pick me up at this location in 20 minutes. I don't know how she got that, but she translated that. It was a game of telephone. She translated that to my dad. My dad's at work. He said, what the hell? And so now he's freaking out because my mom goes to the train station to pick me up. I ain't there no more. I'm on my way home. And so I go home, walk in. I'm listening to my iPod. I probably have an iPod Touch at the time. I'm like, listen. I like open up the door, and my dad is just pacing around, and he gets so frustrated. He said, why didn't you text me? Or why didn't you text us? He didn't even give me a chance to explain before he hit me in the chest. Like, boom. He told me, go to my room. I said, oh! I never been hit in my sternum before. I said, I can't breathe. And I ran upstairs and started crying. I was very confused. I said, why? What the fuck happened? And so I'm upstairs crying. My mom gets home and she says, she's mad at me too, but she allows me to talk. And I tell her, I'm like, yo, I didn't have my phone. So I told the officer I was on my way home. And so I would never call my dad abusive, but it would be times like that where it was just like abuse, like hitting your child is no good, no matter what the circumstance is. So that was an ounce of abuse, but I know he's a great man who makes mistakes. And so that's what this part of the game, or part of the video, is really for. And another story, since I'm here, story time, you're here. There was a time where I used to live in Marietta. And the job, I guess, scene was terrible, so my dad went down to Washington, D.C. and started working for them. And that's when my dad and I split, pretty much. I was at a very young age, very impressionable, and I was all up on my mother. And then that's when things finally worked out. He got a good job, got a place out there, and they started renting out a home. And then that's when my mom drove over, and bada bing, we were a family again. Except something snagged between me and my dad. Something wasn't quite there. I don't know what happened, but I just didn't know the man. It had been 2 years, and I just didn't know the guy. And I was scared of him. And my dad didn't know what to really do about that. And so, in a coping mechanism, he's not great at sharing his feelings. At least he wasn't. He began to ignore me as well. We were just kind of quiet. And so when I grew up, I just wasn't very close to my dad, and I would always go to my mom and I would always talk to my mom about problems and stuff like that. And in a way, that could be emotional abuse or child neglect. I mean, obviously he didn't neglect feeding me or doing anything like that, but I felt like I wasn't safe enough to talk to him. I was actually scared of him. And no fault to his own, it was just unhealed wounds. And so I'm just saying these are the things where it's like, we are humans, so sometimes we can do things that aren't good. But what makes an abuser is when they don't recognize what they have done and try to right their wrongs, or at least face what they have done. And with my dad, he's faced what he's done. He's a good man. But I just wanted to do a little story time here, and back to the video.
What can I say to you? I remember how it felt to take that throne. All that it meant. And all that it did not. A god of war. God of pain. Of suffering. Of destruction. And the one said I chase redemption that I know I can never deserve. What does that make me? God of fools. A god of hope.
Kratos, also known as the God of War, is the last person you would associate with the title Abuser, especially after its recent games spanning back to 2018, with a now older Kratos struggling over the loss of his wife and now having to tap into his emotional side and raise his child. It's a beautiful story of acceptance, rising to the occasion as a father, and truly forgiving yourself and trying to be a better you. But Kratos is an abuser, or at least was an abuser. Let's not forget. Kratos' story really begins during a time of gods, war, and conflict. Kratos was a Spartan for Greece and was one of the stronger warriors. He led them to many victories, but was forced to sell his soul to obtain more power to defeat the enemy. His soul was sold to the current god of war, Ares. I don't know how to say his name, guys, who tricked him into killing his own family, cursing him to wear the ashes of the family he once killed. In an act of revenge, Kratos would go to kill every god that stood in his way, even having to travel back in time to change his fate. The man was dedicated. The part that I seem to always forget is how the gods were tied to natural calamities like water, fire, wind, time, etc. Meaning when Kratos decided to kill them, something in Olympus that was staying afloat due to the god's power would just release. Kratos brutally beating the shit out of Poseidon, the god of the sea and horses. Well, now there's a giant tsunami engulfing the city. Or, he'll kill Hermes and steal his drip. Well, now there's a bunch of mosquitoes that have been released upon the world. I don't know about you, but I'd rather sink to the bottom of the ocean than deal with those blood-sucking fucking creatures. God, I hate those things. Anyways, I made my point. In his act of vengeance, he kills millions. And as of right now, seems to be the only one who walked away from that bloodthirsty rampage, now showing regret in his older years, as now he has become wiser and has a deeper perspective. But Kratos was a terrible man and has a lot of learning and redeeming to do, which, spoiler alert, he definitely does, but that's not the point of the video. It's to look at all of his bad traits. And another trait I'd probably say is very bad is his tendency of, undergoing emotional negligence in terms of his child. It took Kratos a very long time to tell his own child about his secret of being a god/giant, and took him even longer to stop calling him boy, actually his name, which 100% stunted his growth, which is why the child would lash out the way that he did. But the reason we love Kratos and Joel to death is because of how they redeemed themselves. We love seeing an evil man become a bit better. Try a little harder at doing the right thing, even when it's impossible to do so. We love an underdog story, and for Joel and Kratos, the two of them are products of their environment. Abuse most times is a cycle. Whether it's an environment, the parents, caretaker, it comes from someone. And for Joel, the world became abusive, and for Kratos, the gods abused their power, and yet even still, they managed to do better. Or at least, they tried to do the best they could. Yes, they've done some despicable things, but they tried to even the scale with those they saved. Joel lost his daughter once. He will not fail again. And Kratos lost his family to godhood, and he will never, ever let that happen again. Kratos has seen the worst of gods and plans to create a cycle of gods that actually brings good to the world. Gods like Atreus, who can stop Ragnarok itself. He changed his fate. Now I did write one last thing in my script here, and so I will read this to you, and then I'm gonna read off my my supporters. Yeah. So conclusion. Video games as a media has always been a part of my life. Just something that kept my attention and gave my parents a little bit of a break, right? But during this time, games have only become more involved in media. It can even now rival that of movies, shows, books, comics, etc. From all the games that I spoke about today was either a cautionary tale or an enlightening narrative. Abuse can happen to anyone. I don't care who you are, and you need to recognize that. Family, friends, environments, you can be the cause of abuse. Be in tune with your feelings. If you are feeling unsafe, ask yourself why. If it is your parents or your environment, you don't have to stay. There will always be a helping hand somewhere out there. You just have to have your voice be heard. You may get a lot of no's, you may get a lot of side eyes, but God damn it, someone will look. Someone will put out their hand, and all you have to do at that point is grab it and hold on. You may feel trapped, you may feel afraid to reach out, but someone will be there to help you. Trust me. Thank you. And I'll see you guys on the next one. Now a quick shout out. Haha, you already know what it be, bruh. I just wanted to shout out a lot of my members. We got a lot of us nowadays. We got, thank you so much, T, J4455, Moonflower, Kazd30, Ray, MTWTYT, and we got Claims, oh my goodness, and Frosty Spark, Dylan, thank you guys, and of course Zach, my 11th month Goliath. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. I cannot express to you how much it means to me and how much it allows me to just keep going. And also, if you liked what you saw today and if you want more of it, why don't you go ahead and click on these two videos somewhere? I don't know, should be somewhere on screen, as it shows YouTube that you guys like my channel, and it also helps with the algorithm. And hey, why don't you do the Holy Trinity while you're down there? Why don't you bust a little like, subscribe, comment down below? Shoot, I know we didn't do a food segment on today's video, but I'm telling you, it's on the rise, boy. It's on the rise. I'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you for watching. Peace out. Bye bye. I'll see you soon.